Okay, Joe, I want to start with how you ended up getting shot in the chest on a prison yard.
All right. I don't know what it is with me. I don't ever want history to repeat itself, so I don't pick up no matter fucking what. Matter of fact, you told me that one.
This is Transformations with Roman Cooper. On today's podcast, Roman Cooper interviews ex-con and recovering addict Joe. Some of the names have been changed to protect the guilty. Listener discretion is advised.
So, if you don't mind, how do we get from young Joe to shot in the chest and why?
Yeah, the shot in the chest actually did get me rolling. That was 1998, and that was at Salinas Valley State Prison. That was a prison term I picked up. I was out for 60 days. Thank God I only picked up not a 211, not a robbery, penal code 211, but it was a penal code 212, which is the lower end. And I had stabbed a drug dealer and robbed him. And that's what I ended up with as far as my sentence. And I ended up there at Salinas Valley State Prison. It was a level 4. I'd still owed shoe time, which is security housing unit, from my last term. So they put me on a more restrictive yard. I rolled into that yard, and that yard was already on lockdown, and they shot a kite, quote unquote, a note over for me to stab my neighbor, who was a shot caller for the Bloods, and it was a black cell. The Mexican gangs, north and south, they were already on like a 6-month lockdown. So it didn't happen, and we were going to get yard for a half hour, and I guess the whites and the blacks were already on lockdown for like 2 months. So I was there maybe a week, and we went out to yard, and I had my razors on me, and we already knew what was going to happen. Somebody was going to get somebody else in another building, and when the alarm rang, we were supposed to rush the blacks. And in there, you have to go with the flow, or you're mince meat. So I'm not going to say that I was in it. You know what I mean? I wasn't trying to go with the flow. I was game for whatever back then. When the alarm rang, it was me and my cellie. We called him Philly. We were going to watch each other's back during this. The alarm rang. There was like 25 whites, and there was probably 60 blacks. And the blacks, they're mixed up of, you got your Crips and the Bloods, but on those higher level yards, they all run together. And we rushed them. And, I got a hold of one, and I cut the top of his head, and I got him down, and I was kicking the top of his head and watching the skin peel back. It was pretty gruesome, but when you're in a situation like that, it's war, and you treat it as war, and so you're trying to survive, and you're trying to do as much damage as you can to whoever. So it has nothing to do with race. That's just the way it went. I remember feeling, I thought I got kicked, and I got up because I took a knee. I got up, and I went to peel the skin on the top of his head. It was like getting scalped, and I realized everybody else was down. Everybody was in the prone position, as they like to call it in there. They were all laying down. So I realized that I needed to I laid down. And I remember hearing the shots being fired, and I remember hearing the bullets hitting the grass around me. And when I got down, I thought I was vomiting, but it wasn't vomit, it was blood. About a cup of blood came out of my mouth. And I thought I got stabbed at that point. So I remember lifting up my jacket and looking for the stab wound, and I had a big hole in my chest, on the right side of left side of my chest. And bubbles were coming out of it. I remember that. There was big blood bubbles. That's when I realized that I got shot with the Mini 14. My cellie, who was fighting, we were fighting back to back. He was watching my back. He got shot in the chin, ricocheted off his big old chin, and went through his left shoulder cap. So he was laying next to me. He was raising his hand as well, saying he got shot. But yeah, that's what happened. I remember at that point, everybody's yelling out to everybody to make sure everybody's okay. And I raised my hand, said I was shot, and a CO had came over to me. I'll never forget his name, CO Gonzalez. And I remember him looking down at me and just staring at me. And what was flashing before my eyes was I had this one photograph of my daughter. I just remember seeing this big photograph of her. I really wasn't even looking up at the sky or this CO that was looking down at me. I remember just looking at like a portrait picture of my daughter's face. I thought I was gonna die, and that was a turning point right there. I had actually asked the CEO if he was going to help me or if I was going to die. He actually opened up his flak jacket that he had on and pulled out a bunch of gauze and started to administer first aid to me instead of just looking at me bleed out. But yeah, that was a pretty intense moment in my life right there.
So what got you to that point where you thought it was okay to stab a drug dealer and then go to war on a prison yard? How did you get to that point where you weren't very concerned with another human being's life?
I guess, it was years of drug abuse, and I was a hope to die drug addict. I didn't care. I didn't really, there was obviously moments where I did care and I was soft, but there were more moments of just not caring and selfishness, and I just didn't care. I really didn't care,
Do you know why you became a drug addict? Was there something that got that ball rolling, or do you know?
I don't really know. I remember growing up as a little kid, and my mom and dad had split up, and this was, he actually lived in Gardena, California. Me and my brother would go over to his house for the weekend, and he was in a 1% motorcycle club. So I got to see a lot of crazy crap going on over there. Drugs, ran into bikers shooting drugs. I don't know what it was. At the time, because I was so young, I remember some of his friends coming in, and I remember this one time climbing up on the toilet seat and watching this big old biker pull a tooth out of his tongue. My dad used to grow weed in his backyard, so I had an older brother from another marriage, so we would we would just pull the plants and then dry it out over the stove. That was in the very late 70s, so I was little, I was young.
Why was this guy pulling a tooth out of his tongue?
Apparently they were in a bar fight.
So when you got shot in the chest, was that your last prison term?
I wish I could say that it was, but it wasn't. That was my last prison term for some time. That term I got out in 1999, mid-1999, and I ended up going back after a long stretch of clean time and recovery, and then riding the fence for a couple years and getting away with shit and going off and on, and then I picked up another term in 2013.
What was it for that time?
It was for a couple things. It was more possession of sales, and then they finally got me on a possession of sales and counterfeiting charge.
Making money the old